care about these bedspreads. Hey guys, it's Holly, and today I'm going to talk about my most embarrassing moments as an on-air DJ.
Oh Lord, have mercy on me. I don't know what I'm doing.
I worked for 8 years as an on-air personality, or whatever you want to call it, in LA at 2 different radio stations. Both of them were Spanish pop radio stations, although the second one kind of fluctuated because every other week they wanted to change their format. But long story short, I had to plan out everything that I wanted to talk about in Spanish, which is my second language. I also love it and have surrounded myself with Spanish ever since I lived in Mexico for about half my life. So it was definitely a challenge to ad-lib all the time in front of hundreds of thousands of people, potentially, in my second language. But I really enjoyed it. However, it was not without its mishaps, so we're gonna get into those right now. The first one happened when I was recording an interview with my first co-host I ever had way back when, and it was a telephone interview. So these are definitely a different feel than when you're doing a live interview with somebody in the studio, because you just can't look them in the eyes and feel that connection. So I was trying to make it kind of funny and interesting. This artist's name was Jose Feliciano. He's the guy that sings Feliz Navidad. I think that's his most popular and well-known song, although he's probably sick of it by now. Anyway, he had recently collaborated with J-Lo and Marc Anthony, and this was right when the rumors were coming out that they were becoming a couple, but they hadn't been confirmed, or maybe they just had been confirmed, but when he had worked with them, it was kind of during the time where they were falling for each other. So my brilliant question was, hey Jose, did you see the sparks flying between J-Lo and Marc Anthony? And my co-host immediately is like, Güera, he can't see. Jose Feliciano is blind. The hair's natural, folks. So my next embarrassing moment, and all the subsequent ones, come from the second radio station I worked at. And this was a group of people who have tons of stations in Mexico City, and they're very successful, and they're used to doing this, and it's a family business, so they kind of have their way of doing things, and nobody really questions them. So this was their first time opening up a station in the US. They started with Los Angeles, and I got to be the midday on-air DJ, which was pretty cool, but at the same time, wow, I went through a lot with them. Anyway, as many radio stations do, there was a flashback hour right around noon where we played 80s and 90s songs. So one day I'm in the middle of my show playing song number 3, and the door busts open and in comes, let's call him Mr. Geronimo. By the way, it's not cool to open the door on somebody while they're in the middle of their on-air shift, but hey, these guys did whatever they wanted and you just had to deal with it. So this guy was like a consultant for the company, I think, and he had been with them for decades. He's probably like 80 years old. Very proud of all of his accomplishments in his life, and he did not doubt to tell you about all of them. And he walks in, and he's like, here, gives me a CD, put on track number 7. So I open up the CD, and it literally has dust all over it. So I'm like, okay, and like, when? And he goes, oh, right after this song. And I'm like, what is this? And he's like, you'll love it. It's great. It's just great. So just, go on and present the song, and we'll go from there. And I'm like, seriously, dude? You're gonna just stay here and watch me? So I have 40 seconds until the song ends, and I'm supposed to present this other song right after that. So I put the CD into slot number 3, go find the channel, turn it up, put on air, make sure that the other song will pause instead of continuing with the next song when it's done, grab a little music bed, and start talking about this guy named Ricardo Montaner, who I've heard of, but I only knew like 1 or 2 songs of his. And I present the song with what little information I have, which is basically his name and the name of the album. So I go off air, and I realize that you can't really hear the song. So I'm waiting for the volume to turn up, and it doesn't, so I just put the volume all the way at the top, and all you can hear is like the static, but it's like, and all of a sudden it goes, I'm like, no, the CD's skipping on air. Seriously, what radio station allows that to happen in Los Angeles in the middle of the day? Ours did. So Geronimo tells me to just go on air and explain to the listeners what happened. No big deal. It's fine. And I was like, no, I refuse to be associated with what just happened right now. That was not my choice. I never would have done that. And I'm not going to go on air after this huge fiasco and be like, hi guys, sorry, I'm Holly, by the way, find me on Facebook. No. All right, embarrassing moment number 3. So at the second radio station I worked at, they didn't really have a backup plan for on-air talent when we had to ask for days off, when we got sick, when we wanted to go on vacation. They would usually do a combination of asking us to pre-record our shows when they knew that we weren't going to be coming in, or asking other on-air talent to stay for a 10-hour shift to cover us when we weren't there if we were sick. Convenient. So in this particular case, I had been summoned for jury duty and I was going to court, and I had to pre-record my show. Now at this time the station was barely starting out, and they had this idea that it was really important to give the hour at least 15 times per hour. So I would randomly be like, it's 12:06. Just that's it. Say nothing else, just the time. So obviously this was kind of a problem when I'm trying to prepare my show the day before, because I didn't know exactly what time it would be in between songs. So I left a few options for the guy that was going to be operating the board. It's 12:01. It's 12:03. It's 12:04. 12:05. You can imagine it was really fun pre-recording my show. So I did that, and then I also, prepared what I wanted to talk about, randomly mentioning the songs that I would be going in and out of, because obviously you get to see the list of songs beforehand. Everything has already been predetermined. So the day of jury duty, I wake up and call it narcissism, but I decided to listen to myself on the radio and see what I sounded like from an outsider's perspective. It was about 10:05, and I knew my first on-air break was about to come up. And I hear myself full of energy. Good morning, guys. How's everyone doing? Blah, blah, blah. Happy Tuesday. All of a sudden, I talk about the song coming up because it happened to be a song I really liked. When I was recording my show, I decided to mention it. So I'm like, oh my gosh, love this song. It brings back so many good memories, blah, blah, blah. Boom. The song is supposed to have started at that point because we know how long the intros are. And the guy that's board hopping, that's his job. Well, all I heard was some weird lady on air saying, gosh, don't you guys love this song? It brings back so many memories. Silence. And I could just imagine this guy, we're gonna call him Rudolph, okay? Imagining Rudolph in the studio, just flustered and sweating, looking for the song. Hello, it's on the computer. Everything's right in front of you. How hard can it be? Rudolph never found the song. I was just the idiot that was talking about a song that wasn't even playing. There was like 10 seconds of silence, which was the longest 10 seconds in the world, and boom, it goes straight to commercials. And that's not all. I go to jury duty, I come back out, I think I had like a little break for lunch around 12. So this is the 80s hour that I was mentioning before. And I specifically remember there was a song by Luis Miguel playing called Si no supiste amar, ahora te puedes marchar. Okay, anyway, so that song's playing, and in the middle of the song, like Luis Miguel is actually singing, you hear my voice, loud and clear, just go, 12. I was like, oh my gosh, what kind of an on-air DJ goes on air in the middle of a song, takes the time to put the volume up, push on the mic, and yell, 12, 12, 12. I was pretty angry, as you can imagine. So I call the hotline of the studio and Rudolph answers, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, oh, everything's good. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, 12. He's like, well, I mean, gosh, chill out. It's not that big of a deal. They already yelled at me. I'm like, they already yelled at you? Well, guess what? I'm the idiot that turns on a mic in the middle of a song and says 12. Okay, I'm overreacting. I'm sorry. Oh, it was so embarrassing. So the next super awkward story is 100% my fault, and it has to do with screwing up a verb so bad that I really wanted to kick myself. So I was telling some story about some lawyers or something, I can't remember honestly, but somebody had been sued and an issue had come up and it had not been resolved. Well, the thing is, in Spanish, resolver, which means resolve, is not like other verbs that rhyme with it. So for example, for the verb comer, the past participle would be comido. For the verb correr, the past participle would be corrido. So for the verb resolver, my brain immediately went to resolvido, which sounds horrible. Like, it sounds awful. Nobody says that. I mean, not even a 5-year-old would say that. You just sound so uneducated and so unprofessional and so lost. And long story short, I said that on air, but I was in like that fluffy cloud that happens when you have a mic on and you know that 100,000 people are potentially listening to you. And all I knew was that I had communicated what I wanted to communicate. And all of a sudden I see my boss running into the studio and he's like, you don't say resolvido, that's not a word, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I said that? And he's like, nah. And I'm like, oh. all of a sudden the phones start ringing and I take a listener and she's super sweet and she's like, I don't want to be rude, but resolvido isn't a word. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Okay. And then the hotline rings and it's the big cheese head honcho from Mexico City who happened to be monitoring me. And he's like, Niña, you don't say resolvido. And I'm like, okay, thanks. Remember, Spanish is my second language. Okay, bye. Seriously, give a girl a break though. No, I was actually really annoyed with myself. This last story has to do with Geronimo again, okay? I'm in the middle of my on-air shift. He busts into the studio again, and this time he has a catalog with a bunch of bedspreads that look not very attractive, and they're called colchas primor. So the brand is primor. Colchas basically means bedspreads, which it wasn't really a word I was that familiar with, but he's like, hey, I'd like you to go on air just real casually and just start talking about these bedspreads. You know, they're great. And I was like, wait, seriously? And he's like, yeah, just, I'll be here. I'll wait. And I was like, I don't really agree with talking about something that's a paid commercial. It's like an endorsement. A, you're not paying me at all. B, like, I'm not going to sort of pretend that this is just me talking about a product. Like, let's keep that in the commercial break and let's do that outside of the studio and record something. This is not where this belongs. And he was just kind of like, well, I'd like you to just talk about it. I'm pretty sure that if that had happened to me now, I would have been like, well, bro, I'm not going to do it. But at the time, I was like, well, these people are paying my bills and this is what I'm being asked to say. And okay. I asked him how long I was supposed to talk about these bedspreads for, and he said about a minute. Just sort of, just talk about how great and how comfortable they are and what a variety that is offered and blah, 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 and, give the information of the company. I was like, this is one of the weirdest things I've ever been asked to do. But okay. So I turned on the mic, and I really had nowhere to go with what I was saying, which is the worst. It's the absolute worst feeling when you are talking and you don't even know where you're going with your sentence. Now, add to that the fact that I never really got used to talking about, bedding in Spanish because, at home we would speak in English, and at school I learned Spanish and ended up learning most of the language I'd like to say, but I never really was in a context where talking about bedding was a thing. So all of a sudden I throw out a masculine article, the word un, which needs to be followed by a masculine noun. The only problem is the word colcha is feminine, so I would have had to say una, but I hadn't said una, I had said un. So imagine in 1 second I'm thinking, okay, what's a word that has to do with bedding that I can throw in that is masculine? And then in that same second I'm like, I don't have time for this crap. I should just correct myself and say una, and then I'm like, no, I'm gonna sound like more of a flubster than I already am. And then I'm like, I don't even care about these bedspreads, like screw this company. And I stopped talking in the middle of my sentence, and it was silent for about 2 seconds, and I just turned off the mic and sent a song. I fully stopped in the middle of a sentence and turned off the microphone. Have you ever heard somebody do that on air? That is the most awkward thing I can possibly think of. But that's how over it I was. And I decided that if Mr. Geronimo came in and had something to say about that, I would let him know what I really thought. Luckily, he never followed up. But seriously, what kind of boss makes you do that? Okay, I'm done. Those were my most awkward moments as an on-air personality. Thank you guys for joining me for this crazy video. I am an awkward person, and yet still, here I am in front of a camera, continuing to be awkward. Thank you guys for joining me. I'll talk to you soon.